I'm going to record how to create your UI, your web service, and your database. But I'm going to work backwards from the database, then the web service, then the UI to give you an understanding how to build these components individually and how these components connect together. So first thing, let's go ahead and start up SQL Server Management Studio. And this is just a great tool to make it easier to manipulate SQL Server. And I'm just going to connect to my local database. You can do that just by clicking just period. And I'm just going to use my Windows authentication to log in. Now my database actually has a couple of databases already, but I'm going to create a brand new one. And also, if any time I'm moving too fast, I think I just recommend you pause it or rewind it and watch it again. You know, I'm just going to go through this as quickly as possible. So let's call it contact. So this could be the name of the database, contact manager. There you go. The database has been created. Currently it has 0 tables. So let's create a new table. This table is going to be super simple because once again, just trying to get through this as quickly as possible. So I'm just creating a 50 character limit because names can be long. Let's do phone number. Phone numbers are what, like 9 characters, 10 characters. So we'll put a 10 character limit on this one. And the last one, we'll put a note, and this can be 50 characters long. Now we're going to make sure the first two cannot be null. So it's mandatory that we have a name and we have a phone number at the minimum. But as far as note, we're going to make that nullable. So you can choose whether or not you want to add a note. That's it. So I'm going to close it, and then it's going to say save. Yes, I want to save, and I'm just going to call it contact list. Yeah, let's call it that. All right, there we go. So now if I refresh, I got it. There it is. Now if I want to script it out so I can take a look at it and go through here and then open up a new query window. And currently I have nothing in it, so let's add something. Script, select, insert. I'm going to use the insert commands. And everything within these angle brackets here, that's what we're actually filling in. So it tells me it's a name, and it has to be under 50 characters. So I'm going to say, and single quotes for SQL. So I'm just going to put myself in there. I'm going to say Tony. And it's going to ask me for my phone number. My phone number is conveniently 555. Yeah, that's good. And note, we're going to say, I don't know, contact list owner. There we go. See, I'm getting a red squiggly. IntelliSense is awesome. It's telling me that I'm missing a parentheses. And of course I am because I deleted it. Let's execute. One row affected. I'm going to go back to my other select query. And then I'm going to see, there it is. It's been populated. All right, so now our database is good. We even have a first entry. Let's work on the service. For that, we need Visual Studios 2015. All right, we're opening a new project. We're going to use web, ASP.NET web application, not the bottom two, which are for core, ASP.NET core. We're going to give it a self-explanatory name, web service. We're not going to add any application insights. Okay, click OK. And then we're going to choose the web API project. We're going to remove authentication for
to keep it simple. We're not going to host it in the cloud right now. We're going to head and add test, and if we have time at the end of this, we'll try to add a few tests in here to show you how that works. Go ahead, click OK.
All right, so it looks like the project is loaded. This is just a kind of help, like, hey, help screen. It's not really part of the project. All right, so close that out. Use the Solution Explorer to look at the files. That file that opened up initially was that project README file. You can leave it or you can delete it. It's not necessary. All right, so the first thing is that let's go ahead and test it. Let's go ahead and test the API. So we're gonna just run in Google Chrome and just launch just the template itself and see what we get. Okay, so it comes with a UI. You don't need to necessarily, we don't need this UI. We're not going to use this UI because this is going to be purely a service. And we're going to start working on our repository layer first. So let's close this out. So we're just going to be working our way up from the bottom. So right now we have a database so we can store stuff. Now we need to create a method that's going to be able to write to it. So I like to keep everything organized. So I'm going to create a new folder. And we're going to call it repositories. Then we're going to create a new class. So generic class for now, we're going to call it contact reposit. Contact repository.cs. So I'm just going to create that. It's going to be blank. There's nothing in it. So what we need to do is we need to create a class. So public. I'm going to make all of these static just to make it easier. Static just means you don't have to new it up. It's saying that there's only going to be one version of this method. So you don't have to worry about newing it up. You just target it directly. I'm going to have it return a bool so that we can have a success flag, true or false, which is going to say if it's successful, it's true. If it's fails, then it's false. And we're going to call it add contact to DB, just using simple naming conventions. And then I'm going to have it accept an object, a contact object, called contact. Now that object doesn't exist yet, so that's something we will need to create afterwards. And then it'll have various code to actually get it to communicate with the database. And then when we're done, if it's successful, it'll return. So we already have some of that code, so I'll just kind of walk through it individually. So first line of code is connection string. And spelled that wrong, connection string. And this is the database connection string. This is how you communicate with the database. We're saying that the data source is dot, which means it's a local database. Initial catalog is test DB. Actually, we had named it something different. Contact manager. So I'm gonna have to change the name here. And integrated security true, which just means it's going to use my Windows authentication to log into that server and in order to access that database. So next thing we need is to find out the query. So this is the query we're going to use, and ignore the squiggly line. It's just because there's incomplete code. But this is the query that we're going to run. Insert into contacts into these fields, and the values are these, and these are just placeholders. This at first name is just kind of a convention to use placeholders. We're going to replace them afterwards with real values. But before that, let's actually go ahead and create this contact class, so we actually have that class available to us to use. So we already have a folder called models, and those are just, like it implies, model of objects. So we're going to create a new class. This class is going to be called contact. It's the contact class. There we go. And then in order to create the object, we'll just give us a couple of properties. And this is just code snippets, so you can just do this. And then we can just say it's a string. We'll call it name. And then we have a getter setter. So we're creating a class with these properties that you can add to this class, or you can get from this class, or you can delete from the class. Now we're just creating multiple ones, so to save me some time here. So I think I have name, phone number, and I think note. I think we only had 3 in this example. Let's just double check. So yes, there's 3 columns: name, phone number, and note. So now we got it. That's our class. We just save this. Then it's good. Now we should recognize, since it's in its own project, it'll say, hey, do you want me to import that? And by importing, it's just adding this web service models. It's now accessing that folder, which then accesses this class. And now this class is real. And this is great because I'm going to use it right now. I'll just space things out just for readability. All right, so now this is the query, and I'll show you basically how this query works in SQL. This is a real query. Like if I go into SQL right now, and let's see, I get rid of all of this, and then I try to run it. Contact manager. See, it's a good thing I'm testing it, because then I know whether or not it's going to work or not. Oh, actually, no, it's called contact list. Sorry. So contact list, and it's not first name, it's just name. Second one is phone number. So I'm copying it from a different project that I worked on, that's why they're incorrect. But this is also good because you can see how I'm modifying, how it's coming together in real life. So name. We have one that says phone number, so we'll go all the way down to the end. Phone number and note. So, and if I actually execute this, because the term phone number is too long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's a couple of numbers too long. That's what it is. It's saying that it's too long, so it canceled it. So now I'm going to execute again. Now it says it worked. Let's just take a look at it now. See. Verify that it actually is there. And if you don't know, you can highlight it and it'll only execute that line. So there it goes, name, phone number, and note. So it works. So let's go ahead and take that and put that back in here, fixing it. So that's the query, and it's a query that works. But we don't actually want to, it's like a magic string right now. We don't want to enter that. We don't want all a bunch of columns to just say at name, at whatever. We're going to replace them. So that's what this is doing right here. So we're saying query equals query. Query equals itself, but a different version of it. So we're going to say with that query, we're going to replace a lot of these values. The first value that says at name, we're going to replace at name with the actual name. And then the same thing for the phone number value. And the same thing for note. And this might look kind of funky, but this is what it looks like. I'm basically chaining these operations together. So I'm saying query, take the query, take this, but then replace the name with whatever the contact.name is of the contact that I passed in. And then I'm also going to replace at phone number with the contact phone number that got passed in. And then I'm replacing the at note with the contacts note that got passed in. And then I have a new query that doesn't look like this, but actually has the real names, phone numbers, and notes that I actually want entered in here. So after you've done that, you have the connection string that'll be able to connect your database, and you'll have your query, which will allow you to do something. You will execute a query on your database. Now we need to connect string. This is where IntelliSense is great. Look, it tells me that I don't have this in my library, so I'm just going to I'm going to import it, and see that it adds it to that. It's just what it is. The library is already referenced. It's just saying that, hey, let me go ahead and you put a using statement so it knows to go look at that. And that's just because it's misspelled. So I'm going to put that in there like that. Now we have a connection. And you see things are faded out. Whenever you're not using it yet, that's faded out. So that's how it's a good way to tell, if parts of your code is dead. The next step is the actual connection part. This is where things can go badly, so it's good to use a try catch block. So what is it I'm going to try? Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to open a connection, and that's just me saying this connection dot open. Next thing is I want to create a SQL command. And you create that by passing the query and you pass in the connection. And then you're actually able to execute commands. So that's the next thing I want to do is I want to execute that command. And then after I've executed that command, you don't want these things running in the background. Like you want to close these things off. So I'm going to say command.dispose so that this operation is no longer running. And I want to say connection.close to close the connection. Because you don't want, these are how memory leaks happen. Certain operations will continue to run forever if you never turn them off. And if everything works out, I'm going to return true. If it doesn't work out, well, in this situation, I don't want to throw an exception. So I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to throw an exception. Instead, I'm just going to return false. And that'll give me basically what I need. I'll know that something has failed. But in real life, you do want to throw exceptions. And you want to throw those exceptions all the way to the top. So whoever the users are can see what went wrong. That's important. For here, knowing that it failed or it worked or it didn't work is all we really know because the code is really small. Okay, so that's it. Now we have our repository. This will make a call to the database and write whatever we want. Next thing we need to do is have something calling this. Now in this situation we probably don't need a processor, but I'm going to create a processor anyway just because it's good design. And it's just nicer to do it beforehand than have to figure out how to do it later. Okay, there it is, add. So I'm create a, and this is just organization. I'm just creating a folder called processor. Actually, let's make it processors because we might have more than one in the future. And then here we're going to add a new class that will be called contact processor. And right now it doesn't do anything. So same thing, we want to create a new method, static method, because we're just trying to make it easy on us. And then we're going to call it process contact. And then it's going to take in a contact and saying, well, I don't have access to contact. So that's why it said import web service models.contact. You're importing that class. So now I have access. I can use that class. And then I'm going to call it contact. And there we go. Now we have this method. And what's this method going to do? So process content. So this is where we would do some sort of processing. And then from here, we're going to call the contact repository, and we won't be accessing that. So we have to bring the using, add the using there, and then we're going to add that method, and then we're going to pass in contact. That's it. And that is it. So typically you would do some sort of processing, and this one is going to pass back a bool, so we can just return this entire statement. So basically this is return a flag, which then returns to whoever's calling this processing. We're processing, validating, formatting, things like that happens in the processor later. All right, so now we have these two created. We need a controller. So I'm going to take this value controller and paste it. Then I'm going to call it context controller. Let's open her up. And then that means I also need to rename it here, context controller. And we're not going to really use any of these other methods in here right now. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to get rid of them because I don't need them right now. Might add them back as we need them. So right now we're just going to do post. We just want to make sure we can write to the database. So, all right, so we're going to add a put an HTTP post attribute to make sure we're implementing the API controller, and we're going to create our own route, and we're going to call it save contact. So that's how we're going to hit that API. This is going to be called save content. All right, so and then so whoever calls this, I want to return something to them, a flag, so they know. Instead of post, we're going to call it save contact for simplicity. Just keep it all the same. For the thing that we're going to receive, well, we're going to receive a contact. That means I have to import that class again, and then contact. And then inside here, this is where you might do very minimal validation. Just make sure that it's not empty. So we could just say if contact equals null, we're going to return false. But here you might also just throw an exception, and then stop, because when we return, we're not going to keep going. But if it's not null, then we want to go into the contact processor, add that, and then we're going to reach into that method and then pass contact into there, and then let that take over. All right, and then we're going to put a return statement, because that method passes on that flag all the way up. So it's going to continue to pass this bool back to whoever is calling this service. And that should be it for here. Okay, we're going to actually launch this and test it. And the way we're going to test it is we're going to test it with a tool called Postman. So when I hit Google Chrome, it's actually running this service. The service will be running on my local machine. So when this completely loads, that means my service is fully running. At that point, we can start testing it. What we're going to do first is we're going to take this this URL. It will be important. So we'll take that. Okay, so it's fully running and it's working. And you'll see now there's this new object called save content. See, it's automatically documenting itself. So if you click on post save content, it'll even give you the JSON payload that you need. So that's really convenient. So let's go ahead and open up Postman. Here it is. First, it's not going to be a get, it's a post. We're posting data to the service. Then we're going to put in the URL. And we had determined in our web service that the route would be called save contact. So we put that in there. that should be it for that. Go to body and go to raw, and then we go back to that page where it showed us the actual JSON object we can pass. We can just copy and paste that here. And then we know that name can be 50 characters, so we'll just say, we already have an entry for Tony, so we'll use Anthony. And then phone number, we'll need another phone number. Yeah, we'll just make it 7 digits this time because for no particular reason. And then this is a note. So now that it's running, this is the first entry point. So we're going to put a breakpoint right there, and then let's see if it actually works. So we'll hit send, and it's saying, okay, so I need to change the type. So it needs to reflect that it's a JSON type. And what that does here is on the header, it says content type equals application/JSON. So it tells the service how to understand this information that I'm passing. So let's try that again. So I'm going to send it. And you see now it's hit the first breakpoint. And contact, if you look at contact here, you can see that it's been populated. Name is Anthony, node is, this is a node, phone number is, that's the phone number. So let's just step through the code, and we see, well, first step, we're going to step into here. And if you're wondering how I'm doing this, breakpoints are easy. You click on the side and you create those breakpoints, and then these are your commands. Like this, pointing down means stepping into the code. This means stepping over the code. This means stepping out of the code. So I'm just using so I'm going to step over this part. I want to step into the repository processor that is processing. I'm stepping into the repository later to actually write it. We step into there, and you can see the contact. If this contact object keeps getting carried over through each stage. So here we get the connection string, we get the query. Now at this point you can see that query. See how it says at name, at phone number, at note. This is where we're going to start replacing those values in here. So after I do this, now if I look at query, and these are all the same objects, query. So if I look at this query object again, now you see that the values have changed. So say Anthony, this one did not change. So this is our first bug right there. Why didn't this change? And I can see why, because it's this, and I'm saying replace at phone number, which doesn't exist anywhere in this query, and that's why that's throwing an error. So we'll come back and fix that. But you'll see how that will reflect in the database. Actually, it will probably throw an error. Yeah. Now I'm going to fix this because it's going to throw an error. I don't want it to throw an error at this point. So let's go in here. Actually, no, that's under 10 characters. No, that should be fine. Okay, so carry on. Here's connection string. So now we're creating the connection. We're opening the connection here. We're forming the command. We're executing the command. And we're disposing and we're closing connection. So at that point, the database should already be updated. So let's test it. So we're going to say select star, and then we're going to execute. And now you see there's this additional value, Anthony, with the incorrect phone number. And this is a note. So we know that this is an error. We've already kind of figured out why that was happening. So we'll stop the service. We'll fix that so that now it matches. Now it's going to work properly. And then let's run it again. All right, so same thing. We're gonna launch it, wait for the service to be fully running. We're running a test. This time I'm not gonna put any breakpoints because we've already walked through it once. This time I just want to see whether or not the issue that we encountered has been fixed. Okay, it's running. I'm gonna execute it. Came back as true. Success. All right, so then we'll go look at the database. Execute again, and there it is. There's those values. It worked. Fantastic. Now Now we have a web service, and the beauty of a web service is anyone with this URL and they know the format, which is this format here, they can add to this database. Right now there's no security. Anybody can do that. You want to add a security layer in the future. But for now, just imagine how valuable this is. This service does this thing that you want it to do. And you don't have to build it in every code. So if you create a website, you don't have to build the service in your website. The service will run separately, and you just call the service. You pass the service this information, and then if you decide you want to build a phone app, same thing. You don't have to reproduce the service code. You just build the UI code and have the UI code pass the information to the service. So now let's go into leveraging this code with a UI. So that's what we're going to do next. So we're just going to leave it running for now. And let's open up another instance of Visual Studio 2015. All right, so here we are. Let's create a new project, another new project. So we'll go here, project. And this one is going to be just a regular web ASP.NET, once again, not core. And we're going to call this Contact Manager Site. That's what it is. It's a website. It's Contact Manager website. And the same thing. I'm not going to add anything to it. Just going to keep it super simple. Click OK. This time we're just going to go with MVC. No web API, just MVC. And then change authentication again. No authentication. But if you do choose to do an authentication, it's built in. It'll do it you'll only have it on the UI level. So this is where certain risk. If you don't have security on your service level, but only on the UI level, you've protected yourself somewhat, because then people can't access the service without logging in. But anybody who has Postman knows that there is no security. They can bypass your entire UI, and that's why a lot of times these issues do happen. People hack services because it's sometimes easier. All right, so here we go. Let's open it up. All right, so same thing. You get this helpful menu thing, project readme file, which I don't need. All right, so same thing. We're gonna work in reverse once again. So first, we're gonna create a folder called repositories. And then in this folder, I'm gonna go ahead and create a class. And to keep the names a little different, Contact Manager. It's a repository. Repository.cs Contact Manager repository. Okay, good. So now we got this class going here, and in this situation, it's going to be a little different. So let's start off by creating the method public. Once again, I'm going to create a static, and this will be your first introduction to async and await. But most things when you're dealing with web stuff, you want to be asynchronous, because you don't want your website to be waiting for this thing. You know, especially if your website does a lot of things. You know, like for instance, if I was trying to save this to a contact, I don't want to have to wait for this thing to be completely done before I can go to add another contact. Maybe I want to add a bunch of contacts, and it's going to slow me down if I have to wait for every single one. So it's just easier to do asynchronous. That way I can make several calls. I can send a bunch of contact information, and they'll all eventually take their time to write to the database, and eventually they'll all get written to the database. Okay, so one thing here, you can see that contact does not exist because we didn't create a contact class here. It exists in our web services class. So what you can do is actually since we're local here, a simple way to do it, and this only works, we're just basically going to copy the DLLs. All right, so let's see. So where we had the there it is, there's the contact class. So we're just going to go into this folder, something. It's maybe a little bit advanced, but okay, so now we're here. That's the contact class. We want to be able to reference this in the other one, so we're just going to step up until we find a bin folder. There we go. We got a bin folder. And in that bin folder, we're going to look for the web service DLL, which is the name of this project. So we're just going to copy that DLL, which in this case just kind of copies the file name for that DLL. And then we're going to go to our contact managers website, and then see under references, it's not referenced here, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a reference to it. So we're going to add a reference to that web service. There it is. I'm going to click OK. You'll see it's been added. Now it is referencing that. And then when I come back to here, it'll say, hey, do you want to import it? Because now it has access to the contact class. And now we just have to add a using statement, which we just did by doing that. Now we have access to contact class. And if you step into it, you see there it is, name, phone number, note. We're accessing this class from a completely different place. And this is how you want to, this is why models are very important. So you can create a model that can be used across different websites. This is how you keep everything this formatted the same. All right, so now we have this. Now we're going to get to a little bit more complicating stuff here. Unfortunately, there's just no way around it. First thing we're going to do is Httpclient. Now some of these libraries, like you'll start off with a lot of libraries that are just like system.net, it's system library. But it's already there, so I don't have to import it. It's already accessible. I'm not referring to it yet. So when I hit import, it goes and adds this using statement, and now I have access to that. Httpclient is going to help me. He's going to do all the hard work of me making this call. And so for the next thing I'm going to do is I need to get the content. And once again, see, I don't have it. There will be instances where you literally don't have the library. You'll have to import it. A lot of these are just so basic and so ingrained that it comes in almost every project. It's Newton Soft. So you can see like this library is already there. Before we needed it, it added it because it's something that will be common to a lot of websites that when you will need some sort of JSON support. That's why it's already referenced and already imported. So all these libraries here on the side are already a part of this project. And if you don't need a particular library, and you're savvy enough to determine which ones you don't need, you can delete libraries to save space. So there we go. Now we've added it. Now there it is. And what this is going to do is, so this is the setting, the client that does the work. This is setting up a converter. We're going to convert this object into JSON. So, and because JSON is the format that, we want to pass it in, it's just convenient to be able to do it that way. It's the language of the web, basically. All right, so next thing we need to do after that is take that content and convert it into an HTTP content. So it's not just enough to be JSON, it has to be HTTP content that can be passed into this call. So next thing is this client.postAsync. So client has a bunch of methods, and if I wanted to dig down into client, or actually HTTP client, but for just example, if I did client dot, and these are all the methods. I have a delete async, get async, a lot of these common calls, and put, post. So these are the ones that these are the libraries. It created these methods and they take care of the work. So now I have this post async that I didn't have to create, and all I have to do is include the URL, which we already have here. make sure you have the exact. See this, I created this previously and it was under a different local host. Now it's 1268. So you got to make sure you're using the right URL. And then HTTP client, which has been converted through here. So it's kind of going through a chain. Content comes in, we serialize the JSON, we take the content, we change it to HTTP content, we pass it in here, we pass in the content, we pass in the URL, and it's doing the exact same thing as what I'm doing through here, just in code. And then it's going to do that. It's asynchronous. So what that means is basically when this shoots off and it's doing whatever it is, if it will jump out of it. It'll jump out of this method and continue doing whatever other methods. And when this is complete, it'll jump back in here again and then get the response and then continue with the code. So it allows you to, it's like multitasking. You're cooking something, you throw something in the microwave. Do you just sit there and wait for the microwave to be done? No, you do something else. And when the microwave beeps that it's done, you come back and you continue cooking. So we get the response. So it might be unreadable. So you use this method, which comes in this type of response. And if you see me using var is a simple way of saying that I don't care what the type. I know what the type is. I don't want to type out the entire type because this, you can see when I hover over this, is HTTP client is right there. So I could do this and it will still work the exact same. But var is just saying that obviously this is an HTTP client because it's being newed up from this side. It's more readable and it's shorter. But if you can't understand what it is, what's the object is, not by the variable name or by the code on the right side, then you want to spell it out, So this one, JSON converts it to like JSON basically, but in the form of a string. And this is like string content, http.string content. Like this would just clutter up this right side. We just need to know this basically. This is a client. This is the content. This is converted to HTTP content. And if you want to make it a little bit clearer, we might just say JSON content instead. You want it to be readable. Because if you might visit back at this project a month ago and you'd be like, what does all this mean? Why did I write all this? It's important to be legible. So now we have a response string. And in this case, we're passing a Boolean, so it's going to be true or false. So we want to do some kind of logic here. So if the response string is false, we're going to return false, else we're going to return true, which means that it's exceeded. Now our repository layer is complete. And then let's move on to the processor layer. Once again, I'm just creating a processor layer for organization, just for good design. This one is very simple, so it doesn't really do anything. So it doesn't really need a repository layer. But you want to build things in a way that it's extendable. It can grow. The code can grow and still stay organized. All right, so same thing. So we'll create a public. I think we made this asynchronous, right? Yeah. Once you start off asynchronous, you pretty much have to stay asynchronous. So public. Oh, I think it's going to be a static method as well. I don't know if I made it static. Probably didn't. I did. Awesome. Smarter than I thought. So it's going to be asynchronous, and it's going to be a autocomplete can be very annoying sometimes. There we go. So now we have a bool, and then we're going to call it process contact. It's going to take a contact object, which means I need to add the using statement, and then contact. All right, and then here I'm just going to contact manager repository, and then which one? Save contact. All right, and then we're going to pass in contact. And here, this is where you would, process, calculate, format, etc. All right, and then this returns a bool like previously. So we're going to put a return statement here. We need to put in a wait. That's it. Now it's going to return a bool to here, and that bool is going to get passed back up to the control level. So right now we only have a home controller. We're going to add another controller. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. And we're going to create a contact manager. Sticking with the naming convention to make it a little bit more understandable. Contact manager controller. Okay, and yeah, that's good. I don't need any of these. I'll hijack one of them though. And instead of index, we'll call it save contact. It's great. Under views, you'll see there's only views for home right now. So I'm going to copy this, paste it here, and then I'm going to call it contact manager. There we go. And then I'm going to probably get rid of all of these. Actually, let's keep the about one. We'll hijack that one for our code. So this is a very simple, it just says title. I'm going to call it save contact. And you don't need to know what this is what makes it a cs.html, because this is like the manipulation. It allows you to write C# code within HTML code. And this one is very simple. It's creating an object called viewBag.title and equals save contact. And there's another one, message, which gets passed in here. It allows you to access things and use things and pass things along. It's really sloppy to use message, these view bags, but you can. Like I don't even do that. I can just add that text directly in here, and that'll be fine too. As far as the message though, I'm gonna leave that there because I want the message to say something like, contact saved or not saved. So this is the pages that's going to render, and you see I didn't add HTML body, all that, because this is being rendered within another page. It's being layered within a page. So there's going to be a layer. That's why you have this header and the footer. They're always the same, and then you're just modifying the content in the middle section. That's what this is doing. So it's kind of like a code snippet that gets injected into the larger page. So this is it. This page is going to be super, super simple. It's just going to be a title, save contact manager, or actually let's just call it contact manager because that might be kind of confusing. And the message that will be injected here, and I will go back to where that comes from, and that'll either say successful or failed. Let's go back to contact manager. So this is where it gets defined. So let's close this out. We don't need that one anymore. All right. So for simplicity, we're not going to create any UI elements at this point. We're just going to hard code the data in here. So the first thing we're going to do when we start is create an object. Create a new contact object. This is a particular syntax. It's more of a modern syntax. Most likely you're used to more like something like this. Dot name equals Tony. You're probably familiar with something more like that. This is fine. We can continue to use that because that sometimes it's just more readable for some people. And a lot of these things are just preference. Everybody argues the exact right way to do things. I believe just make it readable. If it's readable, you did it right. Okay, so now we have a new contact, which we've created. Yeah, it's complaining, so using an object initializer. C# is encouraging me to use the object initializer. And if I wanted to, on that squiggly line right there, because I have a resharper, I can just do this, and there you go. Instantly creates an object initializer. But for simplicity, we're going to keep it the other way. And then after we create that object, we want to pass it in. So that's what this code is here. We're going to pass it into the contact manager repository and call the, process contact method. There we go. All right, so contact manager processor, process contact, passing in the contact, and then, okay, now what is this? Wait is only used by asynchronous methods. So that means I need to make my controller synchronous as well. So like this one, or to do that, you just write async to the top and you wrap whatever the return object is inside of a task, and then these angle brackets. There you go. Now it's asynchronous. It stops complaining. And then when we get that success flag, that's where we're gonna add that to the view bag. So if success equals true, that's just shorthand. Normally you'll see something like that. If it's true, then contact has been just can't type. Contact has been saved. And then if it's not true, then it would say contact has not been saved. There you go. Simple enough. And maybe we want to emphasize not. All right, good. Let's save it. Let's build a solution. Okay, so it's complaining about not being able to see the view. So it's somehow disconnected from the view. Because I haven't created one. So yeah, let's edit this name to save contact. So views contact, spell contact manager wrong. So that's probably another issue. There we go. So now it's looking for a contact manager folder because that's the name of this controller. And then the view is looking for a view called save contact because that's what it's called here. This is what this method is called. And now there's a correlation. So at this point, it should work. But what we didn't do is we didn't create a way to access this. So let's go into the home index, which is the main page that gets loaded. We're going to delete all of this stuff. We don't need it. Don't even need this. I don't see it even being used here. So yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this view bag, and I'm gonna get rid of all this code or text, and we're gonna call this save contact, and let's create a line break. And then we'll create this. This is more C# syntax. And basically I figured this out because I looked at the original page. I realized that there was this in the header. Like, let me see if I can show it to you. Yeah, in the layout, there's all this code. There's all these, the banner on the very top has these action links where you can click on the home page, the about page, or the contact page. And I just copy that code over. And then you just examine it. You just examine that code. So action link, it takes in what it says first parameter is a link text. So this is just text. You can just make it whatever you want. So I want to make a space to make it more readable. The second one is the action name, and the third one is the controller name. So the controller we have is contact manager. That's the name of the controller. And then inside there, the method or the action is called save contact. So that's why it's called save contact. And now we should be able to build it and run it. And as you remember, I left this running. See, this orange bar kind of tells you it's running. It also says in the text that it's still running. So it's still running. So once this is built, we're going to run this one. So just go. And so you know, whatever HTML page you're on your screen is one that gets launched when you actually hit run. So there we go. This one has a different IP address than the other one because it's a different instance. It has a different IP address, a different location running on your machine. And when this works, we'll step through the code. We will step through it slowly. So we'll start at the very top, which is the controller. We'll put a breakpoint there. And in the web service, once again, we'll put in the web service the controller, we'll put a breakpoint there because that's the first place it enters. And then let's go back to here. And when this loads, we'll execute our code and see if it works or not. Or if it breaks, then we'll debug it so you can figure out why it's not working. Okay, so it's having some issues. Multiple types were found that match the controller name home. This can happen if the route that the service is controller. Okay, so contact manager website .controllers .home controller and then web service .controllers .home controller. So they both, and since I'm referencing web services and that in order to get that class, but I can't just reference just that class. I'm referencing the entire project, and they have a conflict because they both have something called home controller. So I'm going to go back into web services. Web services doesn't need a home controller because I'm not using it. I don't need a website. It's not a website. So I'm just going to delete the home controller. It's gone. And just for good measure, I might get rid of all these. We'll leave the views. I don't really care. Let's run the web service again. Now there is no home controller for it to complain about, so hopefully this time it will work. This is how it happens. Nobody makes it perfect on the first try. You build what you can, you test it. If it doesn't work, you figure out what the errors are, and then you fix it. You know, like this is your best case scenario where, you know, it gives you a lot of information. It gives me a stack trace so I can track exactly down to what file it's located. It'll give me summary information about it. Sometimes it even gives you the exact solution that you need for the more common situations. So web service is okay. So it's a home controller cannot be found. Yeah, because I'm referencing it in home controller test, you know. Okay, so it's throwing an error because there's test the home controller. So I'm just going to delete the home controller test as well. What other errors do we have? Let's build it, see if we can get another error. Okay, looks good. Let's run it. And running locally can be slow, so it's patience. You gotta be patient, especially when you're doing stuff with UI. So this is throwing an error, but let's just see if it works anyway. Because I deleted the UI, so that's probably the reason why it's happening. But it's still working, so we don't care. And it still returned true. So the service is completely working. Just the UI is broken at this point, and we don't care about the UI, so we're just gonna forget about it. And then let's see. Let's rebuild this one. Build is starting. See some red squigglies. Hopefully those goes away. Sometimes the system takes time for it to catch up with itself. See, like it's saying there's an issue, but the build is succeeding. So we're just going to run it anyway and see what happens. Sometimes those errors are just delayed errors. It's already been fixed. It's not going to throw an issue, and it'll just still continue to say there's an error. All right, so now this is the modification that we made. It says save contact. We click here, and it's supposed to save that content. Let's give it a click, see if it works. Yep, here it goes, and this is where the error is. So let's hopefully it's not gonna throw an error. And yep, it's working fine. Just double check. We'll cover on contact, and we see that it's populated with the correct values. So yeah, just ignore that. Just for some reason it's saying there's an error, but there really isn't an error. Okay, so now we're at this point. We're going to step in, and then this is where we're, oops, I accidentally stepped out. Did not want to do that. All right, so okay, that was weird. So okay, we're back in, and now we're going to go to the process contact in the contact processor. We're gonna step over and then into the repository method, which is going to get the connection string, get the query, replace the query content. This time we verified that it is correct this time. So yep, everything's working fine. Connection string, open the connection, create the command, execute the command, dispose of the SQL command, disconnect the connection, everything worked. Then we're going to return true. And then return the Boolean value back to the service controller. Service controller will then return back to the UI, and the UI now you see UI is control again, gains back control, and then success flag is true. It did work. Just to verify, Tony 5599 CEO. If you go into the database, just to verify, Tony 555999 CEO. Everything is working. There you go. And then this will add this view bag to the message. When it returns to the view, that view bag will have this statement. And so if I continue, it should take me to the next page where it actually gives me that message. That should be it. And we've chained together 3 different objects, 3 different components. We've connected a UI, and there you can see right there the UI says contact has been saved. And then after that, it communicates to a web service, technically over the internet. I mean, that's the kind of the point. Now I linked to it over in my local computer, but it's the exact same thing for in production. And then the service writes to the database, and then everything trickles back up. The true Boolean, the true success flag trickles all the way back to the UI, and then it results in this message. So the user gets a message saying that it's been completed, and we confirmed in the database that it's completed. So that's basically it. And I think next time, it's time for me to go home, but we're going to talk more about deploying this code into production, because it's cool to be able to mess with it and create things on your desktop. It's a lot cooler to have your work in the real world and in production, and people can access this, and you can access it, you can use it, you can start building real world tools. You can build a lot of interesting things with doing something like this, for your own benefit, for your own service. You can create your own contact manager. I think that's the key. Being able to build things is a powerful motivator, and once you start building things, it's hard to stop. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, hit me up, and I'll try to answer them the best as I can. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to stop the video. Thanks.